Flex Network. This is the Flex Network. Flex on them. Flex on everybody. This right here is the Flex Network. Yeah. Flex.
Oh, yes. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Flex Network. I'm your host, as always, Flex Shane. You can follow me on Twitter at the Flex Network 1. I'm joined by the Dawn of Fantasy Football himself at Alan Seslowski, a.k.a. Season Long Says. Alan, how you doing, brother?
The Don, that's like the Godfather, right? That's
Yeah.
like Don Corleone. By the way, Godfather. There's been a lot of talk lately about The Sopranos. Speaking of like Dons and lately, were you a Sopranos fan?
I was obsessed, obsessed with The Sopranos.
Yeah, so David Chase, the creator of The Sopranos, he's been in the news lately that he quote kind of spoiled the ending, but they're just putting stuff out in the ethos. The prequel is almost finished being shot, so I'm real excited for that.
Oh, see, I wasn't even following that side of things. Oh man,
yeah,
that's
they're
intense.
making a prequel movie with James Gandolfini's son as a young Tony Soprano in the '60s.
I'm sold. I am so sold on that, man. That's sick.
It's called The Saints of Newark is the name of the movie.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's gonna be pretty sick. I was in love with The Sopranos. It was for those who haven't done it, I mean, go back. I actually just recently went back because I got Crave and started rewatching the first couple seasons. There's a few things that are a little bit dated. It was filmed in, the early seasons are the early 2000s. Is when it was initially on. So there's a few things that are a bit dated,
just the computer, but just the computers and the cell phones. Other than that, it holds up, man.
Oh man, it's just the storylines, it's the dynamic. Like, do yourselves a favor. People talk about what they want to go back and binge. Go and binge The Sopranos. It's a 10 out of 10. It's probably one of my top 3 TV shows of all time.
For me, it's number one. For me, it's number one. Yeah, clear cut number one. I've seen it 5 times.
The Shields, that it's
great.
Like I don't know. Fantastic. But we're not here to talk about The Sopranos, maybe on another day. But there's a few things we want to talk about. So today we're going to go through some wide receiver rankings. And a big part of that is because we've got the draft kit, or you guys have the draft kit dropping over at dfsarmy.com.
Oh, wait. You're part of that now, Shane. You've been making some contributions to that draft kit. So, that's what we're going to talk about today is your contributions to that DFS Army draft kit.
Exactly. So it's kind of exciting. So, thank you for the opportunity, of course, to you and Kevin the Geek over at dfsarmy.com. If you guys want to follow along, we're going to be posting these rankings very shortly at dfsarmy.com. I believe you have to get a pro subscription, or you can always just get the draft kit, but definitely go check it out. But there's one thing I want to touch on real quick, Al, just before we get into the meats and potatoes of this show. So right now, I'm sure for all those people who are out there, they're following the Scott Fish Bowl 10 to be specific, all over Twitter. For those of you who don't know, it's actually the whole point of the Scott Fish Bowl is to raise money for charity. So specifically, the Scott Fish charity is Fantasy Cares. And one of the things, so we are planning to contribute with the Flex Network, and it's for a good cause. Essentially, what their main end result is for Fantasy Cares is to find and get toys for kids who are less fortunate around Christmas time. But they also contribute to other, great organizations. Like back in Hurricane Katrina, they contributed to that. And there's always a few different things. So for all of you who are out there, I know many of us may not have gotten invites to the Scott Fish Bowl 10, but the whole point of it is to raise money and to raise awareness for charities. So on our link, if you scroll down, just the news and the items down below, you can find a link. If you choose to donate, whether it's $1, whether it's $100, it all goes to a good cause. So we definitely encourage you to do that. So that's it. And we're not affiliated with it. So, it's just a good cause that we believe in. So, all right, Al, wide receiver rankings. Now, this is kind of interesting. So the wide receiver rankings really do tie into something that really seems to be getting a bit of steam and momentum in the industry right now. And for those of you who have done some best balls and have done some mock drafts, you'll notice that this year it is extremely running back heavy at the top of your drafts. And so one of the quote strategies that was kind of in vogue about 3-4 years ago was that zero running back strategy. And it seems like every show that I listen to, everything I read on Twitter right now, people are talking about the viability of this zero running back strategy. And so I guess, in 2020, it's a bit of a modified, right? So if you're one of those early picks and you're going to choose like a CMC or Saquon Barkley, if you pull the trigger on one of those guys, it would still be considered a zero RB strategy if you're then hammering out wide receivers in the next 4 rounds. So I guess my question to you, Al, is A, have you done this in one of your many best ball 10s? Right. Many best ball 10s, yeah. Or are you finding that it just doesn't really seem like something that you're into, and you want to hammer home those running backs early simply because there aren't too many great options later on?
Yeah. So it doesn't. What's being like an underreported part of zero running back is that it doesn't work as well in best ball, and I'll tell you why. So the whole purpose of zero running back is that you load up on wide receivers and pass catchers, get an elite tight end, get 3 or 4 wide receivers, and then what you could do is you're probably in a non-optimal position, right? Your running backs are going to be middling. If you're lucky, you'll have David Montgomery as your RB1, and then you're kind of cycling through these PPR backs in your RB2 position. But the idea was, we know every year the biggest thing that derails fantasy football teams is injuries. And when injury happens, you always hear teams go, oh, I had such a good team, but no, injury is part of the game. So if you're a zero running back drafter, you're actually going to benefit from injuries. So when the many running back injuries start to happen, you've loaded up on all of the backup running backs. So in rounds 8, 9, 10, 11, you're taking everyone's handcuffs. You're drafting Tony Pollard. You're drafting Alexander Madison. You're drafting Duke Johnson. You're drafting, all the Marlon Mack and Damian Williams. So and again, in this theoretical world, when Clyde Edwards-Helaire gets injured and is out for the season, or if Jonathan Taylor or any of those primary running backs, you're benefiting, because where everyone else is fighting over those running backs in the beginning, you're loading up on the elite wide receivers who generally don't get injured as much and are hard to predict. So you're putting, you're not taking Julio Jones out of your lineup, but if you have wide receivers further down the board, Jamison Crowder and Sterling Shepard, you're constantly making the wrong decision, which one to play. Yes. So it basically takes into account market volatility, and when the market crashes, running backs get hurt. That's when you profit. So that's what the true zero running back theorem is. Now, why is that not applied to best ball? Because you can't pick up waiver wire players. So you would have to guess right. And the other part of running back zero running back is that you're able to pick up these guys and spend big money on the Boston Scotts if they're on the waiver wire and things like that. So it really is more of a season-long strategy than it is a best ball strategy.
So is it a strategy that you would employ in season long?
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yeah. Right. Yeah, no, totally. And again, so the other thing you hit on in the beginning is that zero running back doesn't work. That one year everyone was doing it. You can't do it when there's 4 players in your league doing it. It only works when 1 or 2 people are doing it in your league. Because then That's it doesn't. Because I remember one year, you're constantly learning fantasy football, and I was like, oh, I'm going to do zero running back. This seems like a great strategy. And what happened that one year was, artificially, wide receivers that were getting pushed up into the 3rd round that didn't belong there. So I was implying a zero running back strategy, but taking like Eric Decker and Larry Fitzgerald in the 3rd round, whereas those guys normally would have been like 5th or 6th round picks at that time. So it only works when you're getting the extreme value on the elite wide receivers and then taking your pickings from the middle rounds of the running backs.
Yeah, and somebody brought up a really good point that, if you employ this strategy, then come early season on the waiver wire, you might be a little bit more ambitious, and you have a different strategy in that you're going to maybe spend a little bit more on those running backs that might become viable options early on in the season, versus your league mates who are pretty strong at running back might not be willing to blow their entire fab budget, within week 2, because they already have a pretty good crop of running back. One other thing just to add on, I mean, if you don't really want to necessarily dabble and hope for injury, another type of running back you can target is running backs in these ambiguous running back situations, right? So the first one that really comes to my mind is San Francisco, and Tevin Coleman, Raheem Mostert. Many believe that Raheem Mostert is going to be the RB1 in that committee, but we don't really necessarily know that. Tevin Coleman could be the RB1 on any given week, and he's probably going to have a role every single week. And then you mix into the fact that if you want to go super filthy later on, you can go Jerick McKinnon, who really is a satellite back. And one of our favorites, the deep dog Debo, was injured, broke his foot. Right now, he is saying, and they are saying that, he should be back by week 1 of the season, but who knows with these injuries, right?
Fade.
So, somebody in that San Francisco backfield might be somebody that you want to target. Charlie, what's up, brother? How you doing? Thank you for listening. Okay, so we are going to get into the rankings. And look, people who are listening to our show, they're pretty savvy. I'm not going to go through, okay, Michael Thomas is number 1, Davante Adams is number 2. And we've already talked about these mid-round wide receivers, but a guy that I feel like I'm a little bit higher on than consensus, and a guy that I'm taking before his counterpart in the wide receiver field is I'm really high on Tyler Boyd this year. And people are drafting AJ Green ahead of Tyler Boyd, and I understand why you would do that, but I'm not completely sold that AJ Green is going to be just classic AJ Green, where he's going to go out and dominate defenses, put up 1,300 yards, drop maybe 7 to 10 touchdowns. To me, a player like Tyler Boyd really does fit into the mold, I feel, of what Cincinnati did well last year. I mean, he had 147 targets last year, and I get it. There weren't too many other options for these pass catchers to really be competing against. But if Tyler Boyd is going to be playing out of the slot, we saw Joe Burrow with Justin Jefferson last year absolutely light up the game, frankly, in this is historic LSU offense. And to me, a player like Tyler Boyd, who's shown the athleticism, he's shown that he's a dynamic player. I mean, this is a guy who played on special teams, returned punts in college, and he's a special player. What am I missing with a guy like Tyler Boyd who can get after AJ Green?
Yeah, I think you have the right concept, and you asked the wrong question. The wrong question is, what do you have? It's like, what do you have right? You may have hit on a market inefficiency here. And I know when you're right up in the DFS Army draft kit, you were talking about those 147 targets, and that's that's elite level target. Now again, it's a new quarterback. We don't know who he's going to lock in on, but what's the difference between Tyler Boyd and AJ Green? Tyler Boyd's in his peak. AJ Green is way past his peak. Now, his past peak might be equal to Tyler Boyd's peak. We don't know. Possibly. I think AJ Green's a big mystery, and I think they represent two different type of draft picks. I mean, AJ Green represents a gamble that for upside, but we know the floor is like out for the season again, or whatever version of AJ Green we see. And Tyler Boyd represents a nice steady flow of production that you can lock into your draft. So I think, depending on how you've drafted, so say you're in the 6th round and you're faced with choosing one of those guys, if you have a pretty stable team, but you're looking for a 2nd or 3rd wide receiver with some upside, I think that would be the case that you would take AJ Green. But just in a vacuum, I mean, for our rankings purposes, I agree with you. Boyd has to be ranked ahead of AJ Green for all the reasons that you just outlined.
Yeah, and to me, it's both players are probably going to be fantasy relevant, right? Like, I have the opinion that if, as of today, and we're recording this on June 20th, 2020, if the player is healthy, then you kind of have to be injury agnostic, and you have to assume that the player is going to be healthy throughout the entire season, because it's very, very challenging to project an injury on any given player, especially at the wide receiver position. As you noted, they tend to get injured less often than a running back. I heard a statistic about 60% less often, than the running back position. So there's that general security there. Now, obviously, you could start saying, okay, well, this player was previously injured, aka AJ Green, right? Right.
It's a general, right. You could say in general, wide receivers get injured less, but in this specific case, it's not true. I mean, you can make general statements, and then of course you could, say that about anything. You could say running backs are more likely to get hurt, but not Christian McCaffrey and Ezekiel Elliott. There's always going to be at the margins exceptions.
Well, and I think what's interesting, so I'm looking just at the best ball 10 ADPs right now, and basically AJ Green is going right before Tyler Boyd. So the market right now is pretty much doing a coin flip between who they're going to choose. My money, if I'm on the clock, and spoiler alert, I have a fair number of shares of Tyler Boyd, and I have today 0 shares of AJ Green, so I can tell you where I'm going. But another player that I'm quite interested in is, what's your take on Michael Gallup this year? It seems like people are pretty much out on Michael Gallup. I mean, I don't want to say out necessarily, but a lot of people are saying that CeeDee Lamb is going to walk in day one and pretty much usurp Michael Gallup as a wide receiver 2 in that offense. And then by the end of the year, Amari who, right? It's going to be the CeeDee Lamb show. That's it. Nobody else can catch the ball. To me, like, Gallup had an extraordinary year last year, and I'm not sold that he's not going to be productive again this year, especially, and we're talking redraft now, early on in the season. It is so important to get those wins early, because then when you are negotiating these trade deals later on in the season, you're negotiating from a position of power, right? And that's so important. So are you cool pulling the trigger on a guy like Michael Gallup at 78 overall?
I mean, anyone who thinks that CeeDee Lamb's come over there and rule the world from day one is seeing the world with very different glasses than I would view it. I mean, I don't think any rookie in history other than Randy Moss came in and had that type of an impact right away. I mean, it's such a bad bet to make. And what is now, even if he comes in and is competent and is good, CeeDee Lamb, there is plenty to go around there. I mean, Michael Gallup probably was going to be before the draft was set up to be a 5th round fantasy pick, and for good reason. He had better production than Amari Cooper, but Amari Cooper has safety and he's insulated by his contract. He got a 4-year deal that's 2 years guaranteed. Michael Gallup is an emerging player, an ascending player. Now, from, like you said, from a redraft perspective, I don't, if he's going to fall to the 7th, 8th round, wherever he's going, there's going to, the room is going to agree with the sentiment you just said. Oh, he's out of it. He's no longer part of the game plan, but that is nonsense. Maybe the absolute ceiling of a top 10 wide receiver finish is no longer on the table, but a top 15 wide receiver finish is definitely there. I mean, you could see a situation where Michael Gallup I could see a situation where Amari Cooper's around 12 or 1,300 yards, right? And then Michael Gallup's at like 950 to 1,150, and CeeDee Lamb's at like 650 to 800 yards. I mean, that sounds almost likely. Remember, the Witten's gone. I know everyone has high hopes for Blake Jarwin, but, we have to temper our expectations. They're definitely going to throw more this year. I mean, they have the weaponry for it. I think there's plenty to go around. I mean, on Michael Gallup, especially at the new price.
Well, you talked about, his upside of being about 1,150 yards. Last year, he had 66 receptions for 1,107 yards. Yeah. So it's not inconceivable that he could probably break the 1,000-yard mark this year.
I'm just saying is that before all the draft, he probably could have been earmarked for 1,300 yards easily. Like, he would have been a late 4th, early 5th round pick.
Yeah, it's going to be a question of how often they actually go and use these 3 wide receiver sets. Last year, they were right around the 61% mark in 3 wide receiver sets, but obviously it's a completely different offense this year. So we don't know necessarily what's going to happen with Mike McCarthy in the building now. But people are drafting Dak Prescott as the wide receiver, or excuse me, the QB3, QB4 in a lot of these leagues. It's really between him and Kyler Murray. Personally, I think the talent is there. I feel like where you have to get him is a little bit too early from where I'm pulling the plug on my QB. But if people are that bullish on Dak Prescott, it means he's going to put up a lot of yards, and those yards are going to have to go to somebody. And look, targets are earned, Devontae Parker. Targets are earned, meaning that Michael Gallup, the fact that he got 113 targets last year is because he earned those targets. He got open. And I'm not convinced that he's not going to have another great year. Will he? Look, his floor is like 700 yards and 3 touchdowns. Realistically, I think he breaks the 1,000-yard mark. And if you can get him as your wide receiver 2, or in some cases your wide receiver 3, I'm perfectly happy getting a player like that. But, really what it comes down to, Al, is what do you have to pay for these players, right? And I look at wide receivers going in a similar spot to him. So Tyler Boyd, AJ Green, who we just talked about, are going right before Michael Gallup. Players going right after Michael Gallup: Marquise Brown, Will Fuller, Julian Edelman. I was listening to your show with The Geek this week, and it sounds like you're starting to warm up a little bit more on Will Fuller. So I'm just curious.
I was always pro Will Fuller. I was never off that guy.
Yeah. Well, I say that because we had this conversation about a month ago. You were never negative on Will Fuller, but I
No.
mean, with good reason, you were a little bit hesitant based off of the health history.
Yeah, I would like to listen to that back because
Sure.
for me, Will Fuller at his 7th round draft price is like he should be on every single one of your teams. Like that's how strongly I feel about Will Fuller. That's why I'm surprised to hear that maybe I gave a different take a month ago.
Maybe it was 2 months ago. It was early in the season.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious take is that yes, he's better in best ball. Everybody's better in best ball, so we don't like to say that. But Will Fuller, this is a philosophy, a fantasy football philosophy that I have forever. It's like with your wide receiver 3. A lot of players like their wide receiver 3 to be a steady, double-digit fantasy point accumulator, someone that gets 9 to 11 fantasy points every week. That's not how I like to play fantasy football. My wide receiver 3, I want that player to be capable of winning the whole week for me. And I know there's going to be weeks that my wide receiver 3 bottoms out and gets me 1 or 3 fantasy points. And I mean, let's think back to week 5 of 2019 when Houston played Atlanta. Will Fuller had over 215 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's 55 fantasy points in most of your leagues.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the type of week winning upside I want in my wide receiver 3. And now you can get Will Fuller as your wide receiver 3. He goes in the 7th round. You don't even have to fight the room for him. I mean, if you're lucky, you can get him in the 8th round. But if you just want to line Will Fuller up in your sights and take him in the 7th round, he is the exact. Now I know. Listen, he's going to be injured for 4 or 5 or 6 games. It's going to happen. But your 7th round pick, all of the risk is baked in. I'm very pro Will Fuller. That said, he won't be super high in my rankings because I know I don't have to take him there.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I think what's cockamamie is people are drafting Deontay Johnson before they're drafting Will Fuller in some cases. And to me, I just don't get it. Exactly. Let them do that. What about Brandon Cooks? I mean, similar sentiment. He's showing the upside. When he's healthy on the field, he's nothing but consistent, putting up over 1,000 yards pretty much every season where he's healthy.
Absolutely. I mean, we know the issue with Brandon Cooks is that he's a high volatile wide receiver that it's usually tough to guess the weeks he's going to go off, but he's in a great situation. He's a deep threat on a team with Deshaun Watson likes to throw the ball up there. And, the problem is one hit and he could be out for the season with his concussion problems. So yeah, it's a very similar situation to Will Fuller, and he's going at where's he going? Like the 8th or 9th round, Brandon Cooks? I mean, yeah,
pretty much right after. I mean, he's going at 102 overall.
Again, the perfect type of player to put as your wide receiver 3. And just understand, you have to leave him in there. Brandon Cooks has 2 weeks in a row where he gets 3 catches for 40 yards and then 2 catches for 20 yards. You cannot bench him. You have to go in with a mindset that he is my wide receiver 3. He's staying in my lineup, and there's going to be bad weeks. But when it pays off, it's a windfall.
So one of the questions we always talked about in season, Al, is that flex position. Just generally speaking, do you prefer to lock in a running back, so an RB3 type player, or would you rather go with an upside guy like a Brandon Cooks in your flex position? And I understand it's all about your team dynamic and whatnot, but what general philosophy do you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just going to be repeating what I just said again. It's regardless of position, and it's usually a player that can win me the week by himself. So I think that if it's a wide receiver like Fuller or Cooks, then it's a wide receiver. If it's a running back like, say, Damian Williams, and I know he's projected to get the touches in that particular game, that's who it is. So it's here's a good way to describe it. You asked about a general fly. It's a high volatile, high upside player, regardless of position.
Okay. Well, and you bring up a really good point. It's because most of our fantasy leagues are head to head, and you don't need to beat the 11 other players in your league. You just need to beat the dude you're playing, or dudettes. This is, I don't even know. That's dudettes. Like a 1993.
Hey, that's the era I grew up in, so I'm cool with it.
That's right. Yeah. So it's the guy or gal that you're going to be playing against, and players with the high upside will help you win your week, really. And it's about
I mean week winning upside, like Will Fuller, like Deshaun Jackson when he was in his peak.
Yeah.
Like guys like that I'm already mentally prepared to take have a total a 3 fantasy point game from my flex or wide receiver 3. I'm prepared for it mentally.
I love it. Okay, you brought up Deshaun Jackson. It's a wide receiver core that I wanted to talk to you about. What the hell are we doing with these Philly wide receivers, Al? Like, tell me, who should we take? Because none of these guys are going high.
Yeah.
And when we talk about who really the options are, so it's
Carson
Deshaun
Wentz
Jackson.
by the way. Carson Wentz is like QB8 or something, right?
Yeah, and I get that, probably it's going to be a lot of 2 tight end sets. So Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert are going to be on the field a lot, but they have to have some wide receivers out there. Are you willing to pull the trigger on a guy like Deshaun Jackson, knowing that he's probably going to just be bench depth for you, or are you off?
Yeah, it's one of my, we're putting together a list of bold predictions, and bold predictions are not just like the craziest, hottest take you can think. I think bold predictions should be something that where something like that, the 20th percentile projection, meaning like, something that's in the range of actual outcomes, but like not off the wall. And, going back to last year, one of my bold predictions when everyone had Lamar Jackson as like QB 12, we had him at QB 4. That's the bold prediction. And my bold prediction was that Lamar Jackson could be the number 1 overall quarterback. Seems obvious now, maybe not so obvious.
Y'all think that this is BS. You got to go back, rewind the tape. Allen dropped that bold prediction last year
back in June.
Started.
Yeah, I know.
Back in June, yeah.
I had 7 bold predictions that were wrong. But
right. Hey, listen, we only remember the ones that were right. Anyways, okay.
Right. Anyway, so my bold prediction for this season is going to be that Miles Sanders is going to lead the team in receptions.
Ooh, I love that.
Because of the reasons that you just said, that all these receivers, like we don't know who it's going to be, but like who's going to catch, I think Miles Sanders is going to catch 72 passes. That's my projection for him. It's a high projection, but it's what I truly believe.
Okay.
Which Eagles wide receiver is going to stay healthy enough and consistent enough? I'm not saying some of them won't have more yards than him, but tell me which Eagles receiver is even going to break 65 receptions?
I mean, if that's the question. That's what we're asking. I mean, Deshaun Jackson, he had a great week 1, but he's not going to stay healthy.
Yeah.
Alshon Jeffrey might start on the PUP list. Greg Ward had a few good weeks last year, but he's still a big question mark. Jalen Reagor, who we love, he's a rookie wide receiver. When there's been no rookie camps,
But even if Reagor has a good season is 60 catches, 900 yards, and 7 touchdowns,
which would be an astounding season for a rookie.
Right. And then you have J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who profiles more of a red zone player. And I'm not saying, so what I'm saying is I think that the Eagles wide receivers, a bunch of them are going to have like 44 receptions or 48 receptions, but Miles Sanders, I think, is just going to lead. I mean, I don't even know if it's a bold prediction. Like it just seems completely logical to me that I'm not talking about yards. I'm not talking about touch. I'm saying receptions.
So I got a question for you regarding Miles Sanders. He's moving up and up and up. Before he was going right around the 1-2 turn. In some of these sharper high money leagues, he's now going as the RB4, RB5. We heard on a Roster Watch podcast that we like to listen to, and of course you contribute at rosterwatch.com. The Siege, CJ Kaltenbach, was saying that he was debating if he'd take Miles Sanders over Ezekiel Elliott. And look, we know that especially in your PPR leagues, receptions are king. And Zeke has shown a propensity to catch the ball, obviously. But would you be bold enough to say, take Miles Sanders at pick 1.7, 1.8 ahead of a lot of the other guys?
I like Miles Sanders. I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I really like Miles Sanders. In fact, last year I looked back at I had him ranked over Josh Jacobs in our dynasty rankings before the NFL season started. And the guys over at DFS Army said, how could you do that? You at least put Josh Jacobs 1, just put Miles Sanders 2. And I refused to do it. Now, look, their ADPs have switched. Miles Sanders, I love him. And if somebody wants to take him in the first round, I have no problem with it. Taking him ahead of Zeke sounds a little a bridge too far, but
a little bit too much, yeah.
But if you put down your $300 in a high stake league and you want to do it, I mean, do it. I mean, I wouldn't bet against it. Miles Sanders will have more fantasy points, but where I like taking Sanders, when you and I started drafting in February.
Yes.
So of course I loved getting him on the 2-3 turn. That was great. Those days are long gone.
He was going in the mid-second round.
I was getting him at pick 24, 25. Like when I was picking first overall. Yeah. I mean, that was going back to February. Those days are the ship is sailed.
Yes.
Yeah. So that he was going in the middle of the second round. Loved getting him there. when he was on the 2-3 turn, originally I stayed away because I was actually taking Josh Jacobs there. Then the draft happened, the NFL draft, and what I think is like a little bit, it's not really underreported, but I think it's not being thought about as clearly as that. Lynn Bowden was drafted by the Raiders, and I think that even though he's not going to come over and take over the passing down work, like he's going to have some serious short passing game chops that's going to take away from Jacobs, because originally Jacobs was slotted, or he was projected to get more receptions this year in what Mike Mayock called phase 2 of his growth and development plan. But the team also re-signed Jalen Richard, which he's a pass catching running back. So getting back to your question about Miles Sanders, is I think that he is totally like where my comfort level is on the turn, but I just don't like I like Drake more than him. And I think in a redraft league, I like the elite receivers a bit more than him, but I couldn't make a good argument against anyone that told me they like taking Miles Sanders over the receivers.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny how these ADPs evolve, especially as news comes out. So obviously Dalvin Cook, he said that, the H word, the holdout word.
Yeah.
Alvin Kamara potentially could. Joe Mixon potentially could. So it just creates these question marks. And Al, you say it all the time. You can't win your draft in round 1, but you can certainly lose your draft in round 1. And we know that Miles Sanders is another year in the league. He's going to have a very defined role in that offense, because we just talked about it. Who the hell else are they going to throw the ball to? And there's that security there. So if you are bold enough to take Miles Sanders over Joe Mixon, I don't even know if it's a bold thing anymore. It's a prudent thing to do.
Well, that's why I want to take the receivers there. If you have any questions about holdout players or guys that with roles, just take Devontae Adams. Like, if he's healthy, he's gonna get 10 touchdowns and 1,200 yards. It's a lock.
And then if you're worried, you say, well, I don't want to fall behind the room. Well, then you can go around and get a guy like Kenyon Drake or Austin Eckler in the early second round. Because if you're going to be taking one of those wide receivers, it's probably going to be between like the 8 and 12 mark, right, of the round. So there's a good chance you're going to get one of these high-end elite level running backs in round 2. So yeah, I mean, from a team building standpoint, I don't hate it at all. There's just so much talent that you just don't want to whiff, right? You don't want to whiff. So okay. We're going to go.
By the way, using my same strategy last year, I whiffed hard in the first and second round. I took Odell Beckham and Antonio Brown were my 1 and 2 picks in a big league.
I remember that one. That was like the Chris List league, wasn't it?
Yes. And meanwhile, by the way, a side note, brag, I ended up winning that league.
You did? You never told us that.
Oh, I never told you. Yeah, I won the league, won I won my individual league. It was part of an overall contest, but I just won my individual league.
Congratulations, man.
Thank you. It was a nice big payday there.
Yes.
But how I recovered from the Odell Beckham, Antonio Brown debacle was I was the guy that landed DJ Shark. I was the guy that landed AJ Brown. I was, all that. So again, not that I knew anything more than anyone else at that point. I liked Shark a little bit more than the market. I actually drafted him, but those type of lucky things can help erase those giant mistakes you make in the beginning.
Okay, we're going to end the show shortly here because I know, Al, you've got a big day ahead of you, so we don't want to take too much time. But I'm glad you brought up DJ Chark. I'm very high on Chark. I think that, look, if you go RB heavy, which, to be honest with you, Al, the way that I like to play it out, I like to have a bit of a balanced roster, right? I'm typically going running back, and then I'm probably going to go wide receiver. That's not necessarily because that's specifically my strategy going into the draft. That's just, I like to draft best player available, especially in those early rounds. If you go RB heavy, would you be cool having a guy like DJ Chark as your wide receiver 1 on your team, who you're probably going to have to get around the 4 or 5 round?
Yeah, so I'm going to make you happy right now, Shane. A lot of times I throw wet blankets on your tape. Not that I don't respect
you. You've been nothing but very cooperative this show, and I'm very impressed. Thank you, Al. Yeah,
now this one's gonna start. I don't want to inflate your ego too much, but Shane, you've never been more right than what you just said about DJ Shark. Sometimes you can't. Now we have to think in a redraft mindset for purposes of drafting and redraft, but you also have to use your dynasty chops and say, where is this player going to be valued a year from now? Okay, I mean that's so important, and that's what I'm working on in my game right now is saying, where is this guy, this player, going to be valued a year from now? Now, of course, and then the more you get hits on that, because I feel like we've mastered the redraft thing in a sense where, like, we know which players are projected to be good, we know which ones projected to, but who's going to be a superstar next year? Now, I've identified DJ Shark as that player. I think we're going to be talking about DJ Shark as like a fringe first-round pick next year. Now, this guy's got all the measurables of a star. He has the measurables of like Randy Moss. The only issue with him is that the offense has not been good overall, so that can hurt a player's fantasy value. Now, I like Minshew. I'm in on Minshew. I mean, if Kyler Murray had Minshew's rookie season and Minshew had the pedigree of Kyler Murray, we'd be saying, okay, that was good. That was good for a rookie. I don't understand the pessimism on Minshew. He actually had a really good rookie year, and he was a 6th-round pick. I know people believe that the Jaguars are tanking, but I think they're going to be pleasantly surprised. So back to your guy, Shark, I agree. I think that he is a future superstar, a future top 10 wide receiver in the league. And if Minshew does pan out and things go well, I mean, that's going to be locked in. So all wheels up, as you like to say, on DJ Shark for me.
I love it. I mean, look, first of all, he proved it last year, right? That's the most important thing. But then you look at his measurables. He's 6'3", 199 pounds. He ran a 4.34 40.
Yeah. He's a superstar.
He's a superstar. 96 percentile speed score, 93rd percentile burst score. The only pause that I think people have with a guy like DJ Chark is just the fact that around the end of the season last year, he taper off a little bit. He cooled off a little bit, but that's because obviously the top DBs started covering him. So the argument's going to be, well, they're going to continue to do that this year.
Well, Shane, that's why he's available in the 4-5 turn. If he didn't cool off, he'd be a 2nd-round pick. So you're getting the discount for his growth. Like his year 1 to year 2 growth was more than you could have hoped for. And now year 3 is where they break out. And you can't be like, okay, I'm going to wait for the breakout, because then you're going to pay full freight. DJ Shark is still gettable in your fantasy league. Yep. Like you could pay, I bet you can give up pick 105 for him tomorrow in your rookie draft. And you're like, I'm not doing that. That's DeAndre Swift or CeeDee Lamb. Okay, if you think, if you're with me, if you Mr. Listener, Ms. Listener, are with me, and you think that DJ Shark's going to be a top 10 wide receiver, you give up that pick. Now,
that's right.
That's what I'm saying. A year from now, you may not be able to, because would somebody give up 105 for Michael Thomas for, who's for Tyreek Hill? No, you would keep the player. So you have to try to project where these guys are going to be in a year.
Well, and I think what's really interesting about that is there's always this question right now, okay, who's going to be the next Chris Godwin? Oh. And what does that mean? It basically means an efficient wide receiver, player who's got yards after the catch, who has the touchdowns, who's going to get the target share. And DJ Chark pretty much checks all those boxes. He's the clear-cut wide receiver 1 in his offense. He's done it before, last year scoring 8 touchdowns. He had decent yards after the catch at 281. And there's not exactly a lot of target competition on the field right now. And to be honest with you, it's another reason why I don't understand the hate for Leonard Fournette at this point. Like, I don't buy that Chris Thompson's going to come in and all of a sudden Leonard Fournette's going to become like a Derrick Henry in the passing game, right? It's pretty much there's 2 players this offense is going to run through. It's going to be DJ Chark. It's going to be Leonard Fournette. And we assume that Chark's going to take another step forward. Gardner Minshew is going to take another step forward. Look, maybe Jacksonville is tanking, but they would not have gotten rid of Nick Foles if they didn't have confidence in the stash. So I'm in on DJ Chark. I'm happy to hear that you are. If we're talking about a player that has the upside to be a wide receiver or a wide receiver going in round 1 or 2 of your fantasy drafts next year, I agree with you, Al. I think it's DJ Chark. We're going to end it there. How do the good people find you, Alan Seslowsky?
At Alan Seslowsky on Twitter, AlanSeslowsky, Instagram, Alan Fantasy Football, and check out our draft kit over at DFS Army. Come over, be a member, join us in the Slack chat. Shane's helping us work on it right now. We're not only going to have rankings across Dynasty, redraft. We're having multiple rankers, average rankings, and then we're also doing sleeper columns, bust columns, value columns, all these different things, bounce back players. So the draft kit is getting loaded up, should be live by July 4th. And then obviously at Roster Watch, I'm doing 2-3 weekly articles that are not on the paywall.
One of the things I want to just bring to the people's attention is the Slack chat. So essentially what that is if you have fantasy football questions, you can reach out to us on Twitter and we'll do our best to answer your questions. But if you want to personalize it, you go into these Slack chats, and Alan Seslowski, and guess what? Spoiler alert, I'm going to probably be jumping in the Slack chat as well during the regular season as well. And we're going to be helping you guys with your start sit questions. So that's the value added, right? You get all these great products. It's a great tool. We're going to help you win in your season-long leagues. It's going to help you win in your DFS leagues. It's making people money. Guys, just search DFS Army on Twitter, and you will see countless screenshots of people winning real money in DFS contests, whether it's MMA contests, whether it's golf contests, whether it's football contests. People are making money, and it's kind of crazy. Like, it's actually crazy. So I highly recommend go check out dfsarmy.com. And really, you want to just chat with Al and I. We can definitely do that. So we are, of course, the Flex Network. If you like what you're listening to, please like and subscribe. Please give us 5 stars on your podcast rating. And, going back to what we talked about earlier in the show, go check out Fantasy Cares. Go click that link below and just donate whatever you can. At the very least, just go check it out. Just educate yourself on these things. Fantasy football is a lot of fun, but maybe we can help make a difference in somebody's life. So do that, and we're going to end it there. So thank you, Al. For Flex Matt, I am Flex Shane. We are the Flex Network.
This is the Flex Network. This is the Flex Network. Flex on them. Flex on everybody. This right here is the Flex Network.